Put your hands behind your back, ma'am. Officer Bradley Hayes said it loud enough for the people on the courthouse steps to hear, loud enough for heads to turn, loud enough to turn Alicia Grant from a woman arriving for work into a scene on the sidewalk. The black Lexus sat at the curb with its engine still humming, a clean, low sound under the sharper pulse of police lights. Red and blue moved across the wet pavement, across the glass doors of the state courthouse, across Alicia's cream-colored suit like warning signs that did not belong on her body. She had been less than 50 feet from the entrance. 18 minutes from the most important hearing of her career. One folder in the passenger seat. One old fountain pen clipped to the top page. One phone buzzing again and again with calls from people already waiting upstairs. Alicia stepped out slowly, keeping both hands visible because she knew the rules. She knew the law. She knew how quickly a calm morning could become a story told wrong by someone with more authority and less patience. "Officer, may I ask why I was stopped?" she said. Her voice was steady, not soft, not frightened, just clear. Hayes looked from her face to the Lexus, then back again, his jaw set beneath a silver-gray mustache. He was a broad white man in his early 40s, the kind who wore his uniform like an answer before the question had even been asked. "Vehicle matches a description," he said. Alicia glanced at the empty street behind her. "What description?" Hayes did not answer right away. A woman crossing toward the courthouse slowed with her coffee in hand. A young man near the bike rack raised his phone halfway, unsure whether he should record. On the passenger side, Officer Daniel Price stood near the rear bumper, younger, quieter, his eyes moving between Alicia and Hayes as if he could already feel something tightening in the air. "License and registration," Hayes said. Alicia nodded toward the car. "They're my bag. I'll reach for them slowly." "Don't reach for anything." The words cut harder than they needed to. Alicia stopped. A thin mist had begun falling, soft enough to look harmless, cold enough to settle on her neck. Behind the courthouse doors, silhouettes moved through the lobby. Lawyers with briefcases, clerks with coffee, people rushing toward rooms where justice wore polished wood and raised seals. Out here, justice sounded like a radio crackling on a shoulder mic, and a man deciding her explanation had already come too late. Hayes stepped closer. "Is this your vehicle?" Alicia looked at him. "Yes." "Registered to you?" "Yes." "You expect me to believe that?" For the first time, the air seemed to lose all its noise. Even the Lexus engine felt distant. Alicia heard the faint tap of rain on the hood, the rubber soles of someone stopping behind her, the nervous little breath Officer Price took but did not use. She had heard that tone before, not always from police, not always on streets. In boardrooms, in elevators, at security desks, at restaurants where the hostess looked past her for the real reservation holder. It was the tone that did not accuse directly because it did not need to. It simply placed a question mark over her existence and waited for her to shrink beneath it. Alicia did not shrink. "Officer Hayes," she said, reading the nameplate on his chest. "I'm asking you to state the legal basis for this stop." His eyes narrowed. "You a lawyer now?" A few people nearby shifted. Someone whispered something Alicia chose not to hear. Her phone kept buzzing inside the car, the sound small and trapped. She could see the folder on the passenger seat through the open door, the state seal stamped across the top page, the evidence index beneath it, the old pen her father had given her the day she graduated law school resting across the file like a promise. Hayes followed her eyes and reached toward the door. "Step away from the vehicle." "My identification is inside," she said. "You told me not to reach for it." "Step away." Alicia took one step back, then another. Her heels touched the curb. The courthouse clock above the entrance read 8:42. Her hearing began at 9 o'clock. Hayes reached for the cuffs on his belt. Officer Price looked up sharply. "Sir, maybe we should—" "Not now, Price." The cuffs opened with a clean metallic click. Alicia felt the sound before she felt the metal, felt it settle somewhere behind her ribs, where old memories lived without permission. Her father on a shoulder of a highway outside Baltimore. Her mother waiting by the kitchen phone. A family learning that being right did not always protect you from being handled like you were wrong. Alicia lifted her chin and turned slightly toward Hayes's body camera. "For the record," she said, "I am not resisting. I am complying under protest." Hayes took her wrists and secured the cuffs carefully but firmly. The metal was cold from the morning air. Around them, the sidewalk went almost still. Phones were up now. The mist thickened on Alicia's sleeves. One woman near the courthouse steps murmured, "She probably stole it," and the words floated through the red and blue light like smoke. Alicia closed her eyes for half a second, not because she was afraid, but because she refused to let the insult decide her face. When she opened them, she looked straight at the camera on Hayes's chest and said, "Officer, make sure that's recording. Every second of it." The metal around Alicia Grant's wrists was not painful, but it was loud in a way only she could hear. Every small movement made it whisper against itself, a thin silver sound beneath the traffic on Court Street and a low murmur of strangers pretending not to stare. She kept her shoulders back. She kept her breathing even. She had learned that posture could become a shield when people try to turn your body into evidence against you. Officer Hayes moved toward the open driver's door, his boots stopping just short of the puddle gathering near the curb. The rain was still light, but it had begun to darken the edges of the case folder on the passenger seat. Alicia watched one drop slide down the cream leather and land beside the fountain pen clipped to the top page. Her father's pen, black barrel, brass trim, one small scratch near the cap from the ear. He carried it in his shirt pocket at the auto shop. Alicia was 8 years old when she first saw him come home silent from a police stop that had taken nearly 2 hours and cost him a job he never got back. He had not yelled about it. He had not cursed. He had sat at the kitchen table, placed that pen beside a stack of unpaid bills, and told her, "Baby, learn the rules so well they cannot bury you under them." She did. She learned them in public libraries while other children were outside playing. She learned them from used textbooks with cracked spines. She learned them through night classes, scholarships, court internships, and long bus rides where she read case law under flickering lights. Years later, people would call her brilliant, disciplined, unshakable. They would not see the little girl memorizing constitutional rights because her father's quiet humiliation had become a permanent room inside her chest. Now she stood less than 50 feet from the courthouse where her name was printed on the morning docket in bold letters, and a man who had not asked enough questions was searching the front seat of her car like her life needed his permission to make sense. "Officer Hayes," she said, her voice steady over the rain, "there are sealed state documents in that folder. They are connected to an active proceeding. I am instructing you not to damage or remove them without lawful authority." Hayes glanced back with a short, humorless smile. "You are instructing me?" Officer Price shifted near the rear of the Lexus. His hand hovered near his own body camera as if suddenly aware of its weight. Alicia saw it. She saw everything. The courthouse security guard inside the glass doors had stopped moving. A clerk in a navy coat stood under the awning with her mouth slightly open. 2 teenagers on the corner held up a phone, the screen reflecting red and blue. The whole street had become a witness, and still Hayes acted as if witnesses only mattered when they supported his version of events. "I am stating it for the record," Alicia replied. Hayes lifted the folder just enough for the pages to loosen. A thin sheet slipped free, fluttered once, and landed near the wet curb. Alicia's breath caught, but her face did not change. The page was part of the evidence index, marked confidential across the top in gray type. Price stepped forward quickly and picked it up before the water could take it. "Sir," he said quietly, "this has a state seal on it." Hayes looked at him with irritation, then put it back. Alicia turned her head toward Price, not pleading, not begging, only making sure he understood the moment he was standing inside. "Officer Price, please note that you recovered a sealed document from the ground after Officer Hayes disturbed the file." Price swallowed. He looked younger than he had 2 minutes earlier. "Yes, ma'am," he said before he could stop himself. Hayes heard it. His expression tightened. "Do not call her that like she is in charge here." Alicia looked down at the cuffs, then back at him. The rain collected on her eyelashes, cold and clear. "I'm not asking to be in charge, officer. I'm asking you to follow the law." For a second, Hayes said nothing. Then her phone buzzed again from inside the Lexus. Louder this time, through the open door, the name Judge Evelyn Carter glowing across the dashboard screen. Price saw it. Hayes saw it too. Alicia did not smile. She only stood there, wrists behind her back, while the courthouse clock moved 1 minute closer to 9. Judge Evelyn Carter's name glowed on the dashboard screen for 3 full rings before the call went silent, and somehow that silence felt louder than the rain. Alicia watched Officer Hayes stare at the screen, his face caught between annoyance and calculation. He had seen the name. He had understood enough to hesitate. But hesitation was not the same as humility. He shut the Lexus door with the folder still inside, leaving the phone to buzz again beneath the glass. Popular morning, he muttered. Alicia kept her eyes on him. That call is related to the hearing I am scheduled to attend. Hayes gave a small laugh through his nose. Everybody has somewhere to be when they get pulled over. The words were casual, but they carried the weight of someone used to being believed first. Alicia had heard that kind of confidence in court from witnesses who thought a badge could make a weak story strong. She knew men like Hayes did not always think of themselves as cruel. Some thought they were careful. Some thought they were experienced. Some confused suspicion with instinct and called it training. He had spent 18 years on patrol, long enough for younger officers to lower their voices when he spoke, long enough for supervisors to describe his complaints as misunderstandings, long enough to believe every street belonged to him until someone higher-ranking said otherwise. To him, Alicia's calm was not discipline. It was attitude. Her Lexus was not earned. It was questionable. Her suit was not professional. It was performance. Her request for procedure was not a right. It was a challenge. Officer Price stood a few feet away, holding the recovered page between 2 careful fingers. The rain had left a faint mark on the corner, but the state seal was still visible, pale and official beneath the gray morning light. Sir, Price said again, softer this time, maybe we should verify her identification before this goes any further. Hayes turned slowly. You want to run the stop, Price? Or, you want to let me do my job? Price's mouth closed, but his eyes moved to Alicia. There was something like apology there, not enough to help her yet, but enough to show he knew the ground beneath them was shifting. Alicia did not ask him for courage. Courage forced too early could collapse under pressure. She only gave him the truth and let it sit in front of him. My driver's license, bar card, and state credentials are in the inner pocket of my bag, she said. You may retrieve them if you are recording and if Officer Price observes. Hayes stepped back toward her, close enough that the brass on his uniform caught the flash of his own patrol lights. You do not give conditions during a lawful detention. A lawful detention requires an articulable basis, Alicia answered. The sentence landed cleanly. Not loud, not emotional. Clean. A man near the courthouse steps whispered, She sounds like a lawyer. A woman beside him answered, Maybe she is. Hayes heard them. His jaw shifted. The performance had an audience now, and the audience was no longer reacting the way he expected. He reached into the Lexus and pulled Alicia's black leather bag from the front seat. The bag was simple, worn at the handle, the kind of thing she kept because it had survived with her through public defender offices, campaign stops, late nights under fluorescent lights, and victories that never made headlines. He opened it on the hood of the car. Alicia watched the rain bead on the leather. Inside were ordinary things first. Keys, a small bottle of hand sanitizer, reading glasses, a courthouse access badge clipped to a navy lanyard. Then came the wallet. Hayes flipped it open, removed the license, then paused at the credential behind it. The gold seal caught a stripe of blue light. For one breath, his hand stopped moving. Price saw it. Alicia saw it. Even the teenager recording from the corner seemed to lean in without stepping forward. Hayes did not speak. He stared at the card as if the letters were rearranging themselves against his will. Alicia Grant, State's Attorney. The courthouse clock above the entrance clicked toward 8:47, and the rain kept falling, gentle and patient, as if the whole street had decided to wait for what he would do next. The credential stayed in Officer Hayes's hand long enough for everyone nearby to understand that something had changed, even if no one yet knew exactly what. His thumb rested over the gold seal, hiding part of it, But Alicia had already seen the recognition move across his face like a shadow passing a window. He knew. Not everything. Maybe not the full weight of her office, but enough to know the woman standing in handcuffs beside the curb was not the story he had started telling himself. For a moment, he could have stepped back. He could have cleared his throat, returned the card, removed the cuffs, and let the truth save what little dignity remained. Instead, pride tightened around him faster than the morning traffic. "This does not explain why you were driving in a vehicle connected to a report," he said. His voice had dropped, quieter now, meant for Alicia more than the crowd. Alicia looked at the credential in his hand, then at the body camera on his chest. "What report, Officer Hayes?" He did not answer. "What make, what model, what plate number, what time was it issued?" He looked away. Price's eyes lowered to the radio clipped at his shoulder. He knew those details should have come first. Every lawful stop had a spine, something factual holding it upright. This one was beginning to bend. Hayes placed the credential on the hood beside Alicia's bag, as if it were just another object he had found, as if the state seal did not burn through the rain between them. "I'm still verifying," he said. Alicia's voice remained calm. "Then verify. Run my plate. Run my license. Call the courthouse security desk. Contact the state police liaison assigned to this building. But do not pretend uncertainty is evidence." The words hit the sidewalk with the clean weight of truth. The young man filming near the bike rack lowered his phone slightly, his mouth open. The clerk under the awning whispered, "That is Alicia Grant." Someone else repeated it, and the name traveled softly through the small crowd, not loud enough to become chaos, but strong enough to change the shape of the morning. Hayes heard it and stiffened. He turned toward the people watching. "Step back. This is an active police matter." No one moved much. They were already several feet away. They were already silent. They were already seeing too clearly. Alicia shifted her wrists behind her back, and the cuffs gave that faint metal sound again. It was small, but Price flinched at it. She noticed. "Officer Price," she said, "please confirm whether your body camera is recording." Price hesitated. Hayes snapped, "Do not answer that." Alicia did not raise her voice. "Officer Price, a citizen in custody has asked whether the encounter is being recorded. That is not interference. That is accountability." Price looked to Hayes, then down at his camera. A tiny red light blinked against the rain-specked plastic. "Yes, ma'am," he said quietly. "It is recording." Hayes turned on him. "I said do not answer." Price swallowed, but this time he did not step back. Alicia saw the moment arrive in him, fragile and uncomfortable, the moment a man decides whether silence will protect his career or stain it. She gave him nothing but space to choose. Her phone buzzed again inside the Lexus, then the car's Bluetooth connected for half a second before cutting out. A clipped voice filled the cabin, muffled by the closed door, but still clear enough to reach the curb. "Alicia, this is Judge Carter. We are holding the docket for 5 more minutes. The governor's counsel is already inside." The message ended. The street went still. Hayes stared at the Lexus as if the car itself had betrayed him. Alicia closed her eyes for one breath, feeling the mist on her face, the cold circle of metal at her wrists, the weight of every person waiting upstairs who had no idea she was standing outside like a suspect in front of her own courthouse. When she opened her eyes, she looked at Hayes, not with anger, but with something heavier. "You have my identification. You have my credentials. You have a judge calling my phone. What you do next is no longer a mistake, Officer Hayes. It is a choice." Price looked at the credential on the hood. The rainwater gathered around it in tiny, clear beads, unable to blur the words. "State's Attorney." Hayes reached for his radio, but before he could speak, the courthouse doors opened hard, and a man in a dark overcoat stepped out into the rain, moving fast down the steps with 2 security officers behind him. Marcus Reed, Alicia's chief deputy, had one hand raised and her official badge in the other. His voice cut across the sidewalk before he reached the curb. "Officer, remove those cuffs from the state's attorney right now." Marcus Reed's voice changed the street before his feet reached the curb. People turned toward him as if the courthouse itself had finally spoken. He came down the steps through the mist, dark overcoat open, ties slightly crooked from running. Alicia's official badge lifted high enough for the security officers behind him to see it clearly. "Officer, remove those cuffs from the state's attorney right now." Officer Hayes did not move. The command hung between them, sharp and public, and for the first time that morning he looked less like a man controlling a scene and more like a man trapped inside one. His eyes moved from Marcus to Alicia, then to the badge, then to the small blinking light on Officer Price's body camera. Every witness had become part of the record now. The teenagers near the corner, the clerk beneath the awning, the woman with the coffee cup who suddenly would not meet Alicia's eyes, the courthouse security guards standing in the rain with their radios pressed close to their chests. Alicia felt the cuffs again, not as metal, but as proof. Cold proof. Silent proof. Proof that no title, no degree, no office, number 20 years of discipline could stop some people from seeing a black woman in a luxury car and deciding the story before the first question. Hayes cleared his throat. "We are verifying her identity." Marcus stopped so close to him that rain ran from the edge of his overcoat onto the sidewalk between their shoes. "Her identity is verified by the state seal in your hand, the credential on your hood, the judge calling her phone, and the fact that I am her chief deputy." His voice did not rise. That made it worse. It was controlled enough to sound like court. Hayes looked toward Price, as if searching for backup. Price held the recovered document in both hands now, careful not to bend it. "Sir," Price said, "we have her credentials." Alicia turned her head slightly. The words were small, but she heard the courage inside them. Hayes heard it too. His face tightened, but the street had already shifted beyond him. A low murmur moved through the crowd. Someone whispered, "State's attorney?" Another person said, "He had her cuffed this whole time." Marcus looked at Alicia, and for half a second his official mask cracked. Concern crossed his face, quick but real. "Are you hurt?" Alicia shook her head once. No, it was not entirely true. Her wrist stung from the cold pressure. Her suit sleeve was damp. The sealed folder on the passenger seat had water along the edges. Her father's pen was no longer clipped to the top page. She saw it then, lying near the front tire of the patrol car, half hidden in a shallow stream of rainwater moving along the curb. The sight struck deeper than the cuffs. That pen had signed her first lease, her first bar application, her oath of office. Her father had used it to write repair estimates in a shop where men called him sir until the day a stop on a highway turned him into someone they no longer trusted. Alicia looked at the pen, then back at Hayes. "Take the cuffs off," Marcus said again. Hayes finally reached for the key. The metal clicked behind her. Once. Twice. The cuffs loosened and came away from Alicia's wrists, leaving two red circles pressed into her skin like the memory of a door that had almost closed. She brought her hands forward slowly. No dabbing, no checking, no performance of pain for the cameras. She simply looked at her wrists, then folded her fingers together until they were still. Hayes held the cuffs at his side, suddenly unsure what to do with them. "There appears to have been a misunderstanding," he said. Alicia lifted her eyes to him. Rain traced a thin line down her cheek, but her voice stayed level. "No, Officer Hayes. A misunderstanding is when two people lack the same information. You have my plate. You have my license. You have my credentials. You had a judge calling my phone. You had an officer telling you to verify. What you had was not missing information." The sidewalk went quiet again. Even Marcus said nothing. Alicia stepped toward the patrol car and bent carefully to pick up her father's pen. She wiped it against the inside of her sleeve, gentle, as if it were alive. The brass trim caught one pale stripe of morning light. Then the police radio cracked from Hayes' shoulder, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Unit 12, be advised. State Police Liaison confirms State's Attorney Grant is expected in courtroom 3. Escort priority. Do not delay." Hayes stared forward, the color draining from his face. Alicia placed the pen in her pocket, took the damp folder from the Lexus, and looked at Price. "Preserve your body camera footage. Preserve his. Preserve the dispatch audio. Chain of custody starts now." Price nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Hayes did not speak. The courthouse clock read 8:53. Alicia had 7 minutes to walk inside, stand before the state, and open a case about abuse of power. This time, the evidence was on her wrists. For a few seconds after the radio call, Alicia Grant did not move. The entire morning seemed to pause around her, held in the thin rain between the courthouse steps and the curb. The police lights still turned, red and blue washing over the Lexus, over Officer Hayes' pale face, over the damp folder pressed against Alicia's chest. But the sound inside her had changed. The cuffs were gone. The crowd was quiet. And in the sudden space where anger could have risen, Alicia felt something older and heavier settle into place. Memory. Her father's hands at the kitchen table. The smell of motor oil in his work shirt. The way he had smiled when he gave her the fountain pen, trying to make pride look bigger than the years he had swallowed pain without witnesses. She touched the pen in her pocket with 2 fingers and breathed in slowly. The morning air tasted like rain, exhaust, and courthouse stone. Marcus Reed stepped closer, lowering his voice. Alicia, we can ask Judge Carter for a continuance. Nobody would blame you. Alicia looked toward the glass doors. Beyond them, the lobby lights glowed warm against the gray morning, and people moved in blurred shapes behind the reflections. Upstairs, courtroom 3 was waiting. The governor's council was waiting. Reporters were waiting. Families who had lost faith in the system were waiting. And now, so was the truth from the sidewalk. No, she said quietly. Marcus studied her wrists, the red marks still visible below the damp edge of her sleeves. You have 7 minutes. Then we should walk fast. Officer Price stood near the Lexus, holding the recovered document inside a clear evidence sleeve one of the security officers had brought from the courthouse desk. His hands were careful, almost reverent, as though the paper had become more than paper. Hayes remained beside the patrol car, cuffs closed in one hand, his other hand resting near his radio without touching it. He looked smaller now, not because his body had changed, but because certainty had left him. Alicia stepped toward him. The crowd seemed to lean without moving. Hayes opened his mouth, then shut it. The apology he wanted to offer would have been too easy, too late, and too small for what had happened. Alicia spared him the comfort of accepting it before he had earned it. Officer Hayes, she said, you will write a full report before the end of your shift. You will include the basis for the stop, every instruction given, every item removed from my vehicle, and every moment after my credentials were presented. Hayes nodded once, stiffly. Yes, ma'am. The words sounded unfamiliar in his mouth. Alicia turned to Price. And you will submit your footage independently. Price met her eyes. I will. That answer carried more than obedience. It carried a choice. Alicia held his gaze for a heartbeat, then nodded. A faint breeze moved through the street, lifting the corner of the damp folder. One page inside had curled from the rain, but the ink remained readable. Abuse of authority. Evidence review. Pattern of misconduct. The phrases seemed to breathe against her palm. She had come to court to argue that power without accountability could turn ordinary people into targets. Now she was walking in with the argument marked on her skin. Marcus opened an umbrella over her, but Alicia stepped out from beneath it after 2 paces. She wanted the rain on her face. She wanted the cold air. She wanted to remember exactly how the morning felt before anyone polished it into language safe enough for a press statement. As she crossed the sidewalk, the woman who had whispered about the car lowered her eyes. Alicia passed without looking back. The courthouse doors opened, and warm air rolled out carrying the smell of paper, coffee, and old wood. Just before she entered, she glanced once at the Lexus, the patrol lights, the wet curb where the pen had fallen, and the officer standing beside a mistake he could no longer rename. Then Alicia Grant walked into the building with her head high, her wrists uncovered, and the silence behind her following like testimony. Inside courtroom 3, the air was warm, polished, and waiting. Rows of reporters turned as Alicia Grant entered with rain on her shoulders and red marks still visible at her wrists. The room had been murmuring a moment earlier, full of paper shuffling, camera shutters, and low voices from attorneys trying to sound calm. Then she crossed the threshold, and the sound thinned into silence. Judge Evelyn Carter looked down from the bench, her silver glasses resting low on her nose, her expression changing only by a fraction, but Alicia saw it. Concern first, then recognition, then the careful stillness of a judge who understood that something far larger than tardiness had walked into her courtroom. Marcus Reed followed close behind with the damp folder held flat against his chest, while a clerk hurried to bring towels and a fresh legal pad. Alicia did not take the towel right away. She moved to the counsel table, set her father's fountain pen beside the microphone, and placed both hands on the edge of the wood. Her wrists were uncovered. She made no effort to hide them. Across the aisle, the governor's counsel, Preston Wallace, watched her with the stiff posture of a man who had expected to argue policy and had suddenly been handed a living exhibit. Behind him sat two senior police officials, one in uniform, one in a dark suit, both staring at the marks on her skin with the same uncomfortable calculation Officer Hayes had worn outside. Judge Carter leaned toward the microphone. "Madam State's Attorney, are you able to proceed?" Alicia felt the whole room waiting for her answer. The easy answer would have been yes. The stronger answer would have been anger. But Alicia had built her life on precision, not reaction. She picked up the fountain pen, turned it once between her fingers, and looked toward the bench. "Yes, Your Honor. And before I begin, I need to make a factual statement for the record." Judge Carter nodded. "Proceed." Alicia turned slightly, not to face the cameras but to face the room. At approximately 8:38 this morning, less than 50 feet from this courthouse, I was detained by a uniformed officer while arriving for this hearing. My credentials were presented. My identity was verifiable. A judge contacted my phone. My deputy arrived with official confirmation. Still, I remained in handcuffs until dispatch confirmed what had already been in front of him. No one moved. Even the pen stopped. Alicia heard a reporter inhale. She heard the soft click of the courtroom door closing behind the last person who had slipped in from the hallway. Then a phone buzzed at the defense table. Preston Wallace looked down, read the screen, and went pale. Within seconds, phones began lighting up across the room. Reporters, staffers, deputies. A video from the sidewalk had already surfaced online. The title on one screen was simple and brutal: State's Attorney detained outside her own hearing. The clip had sound: Hayes' voice, Alicia's calm response, the judge's voicemail, Marcus calling from the courthouse steps. The room did not watch it all, but it did not have to. Truth has a temperature when it enters a room. Everyone could feel it rising. Judge Carter removed her glasses slowly. "Is the officer involved present in this building?" A bailiff near the wall touched his earpiece, listened, then answered, "Yes, Your Honor. Officer Hayes is in the hallway with internal affairs." Alicia did not turn around. She could feel him out there without seeing him, standing on the other side of the courtroom doors, separated from her now not by power, but by consequences. Judge Carter's voice lowered. "Then this court will preserve all related recordings, including body camera footage, dispatch audio, courthouse security video, and bystander recordings submitted to the clerk." The uniformed police official behind Preston Wallace shifted in his seat. Alicia looked at him, then at the room filled with people who had come to debate whether patterns of misconduct were real. Her wrists answered before she did. "Your Honor," she said, her voice clear enough to reach the back row. "The case before this court is not about one officer having one bad morning. It is about what happens when suspicion becomes habit, when habit becomes procedure, and when procedure is used against citizens who have done nothing wrong." In the hallway beyond the doors, Officer Hayes heard every word through the wooden frame. For the first time that morning, he was the one standing outside, waiting for someone else to decide what justice would do next. The courtroom did not erupt after Alicia spoke. It did something more powerful. It stayed quiet, the kind of quiet that made every person inside aware of the chair beneath them, the breath in their chest, the small machinery of conscience beginning to turn. Judge Carter looked toward the side door and gave a single nod to the bailiff. "Bring Officer Hayes in." The wooden door opened with a careful creak. Officer Bradley Hayes stepped inside, no longer wearing the certainty he had carried on the sidewalk. His uniform was still neat. His badge still caught the overhead light. But his eyes had changed. They moved first to the bench, then to the police officials, then finally to Alicia's wrists resting on the counsel table. He saw the red marks he had left by assuming too much and listening too little. For a moment, He seemed to shrink inside his own silence. Judge Carter's voice was calm, but there was iron beneath it. Officer Hayes, this court has ordered preservation of all recordings connected to the detention outside this building. You will cooperate fully with internal affairs and with any independent review assigned by the state. Hayes nodded. Yes, Your Honor. The words came out low. Alicia watched him without satisfaction. Satisfaction would have been easy. It would have warmed the room for a second and left nothing useful behind. She wanted something harder. She wanted the record. She wanted the pattern named. She wanted every person in that courtroom to understand that accountability was not revenge. It was maintenance for justice, the same way a bridge needed inspection before the cracks became collapse. Judge Carter turned back to Alicia. Madam State's Attorney, you may continue. Alicia stood. The damp edge of her sleeve brushed the wood. She picked up her father's pen and held it lightly between two fingers. Thank you, Your Honor. Her voice was steady, but softer now, pulling the room closer instead of pushing against it. I'm not asking this court to decide today's case based on what happened to me this morning. I'm asking the court to understand why these records matter, why body cameras matter, why dispatch logs matter, why complaints dismissed as attitude, confusion, or non-compliance matter. Officer Hayes looked down. Officer Price had slipped into the back row with internal affairs, his body camera already removed and sealed in a clear evidence bag. Alicia noticed him there, shoulders tense, face pale but present. He had come inside. He had not disappeared. That mattered too. Power, Alicia continued, does not become dangerous only when someone intends harm. Sometimes it becomes dangerous when someone stops questioning their own certainty. Preston Wallace shifted at the opposite table, but he did not object. The governor's counsel knew the room had moved beyond technical arguments. Reporters typed quietly, their fingers careful on the keys, as if loud typing would break the spell. Alicia turned one page of the damp file. The paper made a soft, tired sound. This case includes 26 complaints over 4 years, 14 traffic stops without citations, 9 searches that produced no charges, and 6 internal reviews closed without interviewing the citizens involved. The numbers landed one by one. Not dramatic, not exaggerated, just undeniable. Behind every number is a person who had to go home and explain to a child why being calm did not protect them, why doing everything right still was not enough. Hayes closed his eyes. Not for long, just long enough for Alicia to see that the words had found a place he could not defend. Judge Carter looked at him over the top of the bench, then back to the file. This court will hear the evidence. Alicia nodded. That is all we have ever asked. Hayes lifted his head then, and for the first time that morning, he did not look at Alicia as a problem to control or mistake to survive. He looked at her as a person he had failed to see. His mouth moved like he wanted to speak, but the courtroom was not a place for easy apologies. Alicia gave him no smile, no anger, no rescue from the weight of his own recognition. She simply returned to the record. The pen touched paper with a small scratch, and in that sound, quiet as rain against glass, the morning began to change from humiliation into testimony. By noon, the rain had stopped, but the marks on Alicia Grant's wrists had not faded. They rested beneath the cuffs of her suit sleeves like quiet witnesses, visible only when she reached for a document or turned a page. The hearing lasted nearly 3 hours. No one hurried it. No one dared reduce it to an argument over one officer, one curb, one bad decision. Judge Carter listened as the records came forward, as dispatch logs were entered, as internal reviews were questioned, as numbers became names, and names became stories that had waited too long to be heard. Alicia did not raise her voice once. She did not need to. Every sentence carried the weight of the sidewalk, the wet folder, the blinking body camera, the old pen moving steadily across her notes. Outside the courtroom, reporters filled the hallway, but inside, the room remained almost reverent. When Judge Carter finally ordered an independent review of the department's traffic stop practices and full preservation of all related footage, the sound of her gavel was not loud. Still, it seemed to travel through the building like a bell. Officer Hayes sat in the back row when it happened. He had been allowed to remain only after surrendering his body camera and giving an initial statement to Internal Affairs. His face was pale, his hands folded tightly in his lap. When the gavel fell, he looked down at the badge on his chest, and for the first time in years, it did not look like proof that he was right. It looked like a question. After the hearing, Alicia stepped into the hallway with Marcus beside her. Cameras lifted. Questions came all at once. Did she believe the stop was racially motivated? Would charges be filed? Was she asking for Hayes to be fired? Alicia paused beneath the tall courthouse windows, where the afternoon light spread across the marble floor in long, gold rectangles. She could have fed the crowd a perfect sentence. She could have turned pain into victory and victory into applause. Instead, she looked past the microphones toward the far end of the hall, where Hayes stood alone beside Officer Price. Price held a sealed evidence receipt in both hands. Hayes held nothing. That seemed right. Alicia faced the cameras. This morning, I was reminded that dignity should not depend on being recognized by title. The law must protect people before anyone knows who they are. The hallway went still. She continued, accountability is not revenge. It is how we make sure the next person stopped on a curb does not need a state seal in her bag to be treated like a human being. No one spoke for a moment after that. Then Alicia turned away from the microphones. As she passed Hayes, he straightened. His lips parted, but no easy apology came. His eyes lowered to the faint red line, still visible at her wrist. Alicia stopped beside him, not close, not cold, simply present. "Officer Hayes," she said quietly, "do the work before you ask for forgiveness." He nodded once, and this time there was no pride in it, only the beginning of understanding. Alicia walked on. Outside, the sky had opened into a clear, pale blue over the courthouse steps. Her Lexus waited at the curb, rainwater drying on the hood. She stood there for a second, then took her father's fountain pen from her pocket. The brass trim caught the sunlight, warm and steady. Marcus opened the car door, but Alicia did not get in right away. She looked back at the courthouse, at the windows, at the place where humiliation had entered and testimony had come out. Then she slid the pen into the folder, closed it carefully, and stepped into the waiting light without looking back.